One of the great interests in my life has been to read missionary biographies, which have inspired me, motivated me in my own service for God over 50 years. One of the most outstanding missionaries from a past century was a man called Hudson Taylor, who spent 54 years in China. He sailed from Liverpool docks on the 19th of September 1853, and at that moment he looked back from the ship to see the lone figure of his mother standing with tears running down her cheeks, waving a handkerchief, saying goodbye to her son of 21 years of age. It was then, Hudson Taylor said, that he fully appreciated the depth of truth in John 3:16. God the Father had such a heart when he sent his son into the world. Ultimately, Hudson Taylor became the founder of the China Inland Mission. On Brighton Beach in 1865, when he had returned home on furlough, he prayed. He prayed to God that God would raise up 1,000 missionaries for China. Ultimately, that prayer was answered. Taylor's biography is an amazing story of challenge, of persecution, of opposition, and of progress and advancement in the gospel. Despite facing opposition, despite persecution, despite bereavement, he lost 3 children at birth and 2 other small children early in life. He suffered great financial struggles and lack of support. Once, when he was completely overwhelmed with difficulties and problems, he made this statement: "I refuse to be discouraged." This is the title of my message today. Over the years, I've repeated this title to myself for my own benefit. I refuse to be discouraged. Hudson Taylor again said that there are 3 stages to the great work of God. First, it is impossible. Then it's difficult. Then it's done. Hudson Taylor, his life reminds me of another great missionary called the Apostle Paul, and his attitude and his spirit as recorded in the letter to Corinthians, the 2nd letter, and in chapter 4. Paul says in verse 1, "Therefore, since God in his mercy has given us this new ministry, we never give up." Oh, what a phrase that is. We never give up. And then Paul goes on to say in verse 8, "We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but not knocked out." And in verse 16 of that chapter, Paul, for the 2nd time, says, "That is why we never give up." It may well be that Hudson Taylor was reading that chapter and he thought about these 2 statements in verse 1 and verse 16. We never give up. And his response was, "I refuse to be discouraged." So let us today consider the Apostle Paul and what he says in that great chapter. I want to talk a little about the opposition that he faced, and then the obstacles he fought, and then the optimism for the future that he conveys at the end of the chapter. So let's think about the opposition he faced. Paul likened himself to a fragile clay jar that could be easily broken. In his 2nd letter to the Corinthians, you will find that Paul is very personal about what he has endured in his service for the Lord. He says he was pressed down on every side by troubles. He was perplexed. He was hunted down. He was knocked down. That's the language and the words he uses. In chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians, he talks about hardships. He talks about persecution, troubles, all that he suffered. Back to his missionary journey in Acts 13, there was a mob that rose up against Paul and Barnabas and ran them out of town. In chapter 14, he's in Lystra, where he was stoned, dragged out of the town and left for dead. The hardline Jews were bitterly opposed to Paul and to his preaching of the gospel. It is true to say that there is an increasing opposition to the gospel today, all over the world. I just caught in the news the other day an example. In London, recently, a lovely girl was on the streets with her guitar singing gospel songs when the police arrived and forbade her to continue to sing. What opposition, even in the UK. In the workplace, if you put your head or dare to put your head above the parapet and declare the truth of the Bible in relation to same-sex marriage, to abortion, to transgender, whatever moral issue is current on issue today, you will discover how fierce the opposition will be. Sadly, I have to say that even in church life, you will experience opposition and criticism. It would be easy to be discouraged and feel like giving up. Someone can be so hurtful in what they say, and you're trying your best to serve the Lord. I've been amazed just how much opposition surfaces in church life when new ideas are suggested or when creative initiatives are introduced to reach young people or to become relevant to the community. My message from this little video today is: do not give up. Refuse to be discouraged. Secondly, let's think about the obstacles that he fought. Paul listed for us some of the obstacles. Often he was in prison. In Philippi, he was beaten and shackled in stocks. He had been whipped. He faced death again and again. 5 times, he says, he was lashed with a whip. He was beaten with rods. He was stoned. He was shipwrecked 3 times. He was adrift at sea. He was hungry. He was thirsty. He was cold. He also faced the opposition from the devil. Ill health to Paul was an obstacle when he talks about the thorn that he had in the flesh. So his obstacles were physical, they were emotional, and even spiritual. He understood the pain, all the privations, and the rejection by people. If you have ever witnessed the demands of an obstacle race, the competitor is exhausted when he gets to the last hurdle to get to the finishing line. Sometimes church life is like an obstacle race. It is so exhausting, trying to continue to the end. And some believers have many obstacles to overcome as people would attempt to halt their progress in the Christian life. Don't give up. That's my appeal from my heart. Refuse to be discouraged. Thirdly, let's consider briefly his optimism for the future. Paul says at the end of chapter 4 of 2 Corinthians, we don't look at the troubles we see now. Rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will be gone, soon be gone, but the things we cannot see will last forever. What a hope. Paul's eye was on the glory to come, when we will share with Christ in his kingdom. Hudson Taylor also said that carrying the cross does mean following in Jesus' footsteps. And in his footsteps are rejection, broken-heartedness, persecution, and death. There are not two Christs, Hudson Taylor said. An easygoing one for easygoing Christians, and a suffering one for exceptional believers. There is only one Christ. Are we willing to follow his lead? The words of an old song come to mind. It is not an easy road. We are travelling to heaven, for many are the thorns on the way. Let me play a song here at the end of this little message, which is rather sentimental and special to me. It is sung by Colin Tilsley, the founder of Gospel Literature Outreach, the organisation that I served with for 40 years. Colin was diagnosed with motor neuron disease at 43 years of age. He died at 46, leaving his wife Cynthia, a widow, with 4 children. Here are the words of the first verse of that song. So send I you to labour unrewarded, to serve unpaid, unloved, unsought, unknown, to bear rebuke, to suffer scorn and scoffing. So send I you to toil for me alone. Please forgive the quality of the recording, because it was recorded over 50 years ago. But my closing appeal in this little message is, don't give up. Refuse to be discouraged. May God bless you.
So send I you to labour unrewarded, to serve unpaid, unloved, unsought, unknown, to bear rebuke, to suffer scorn and scoffing. So send I you to toil for me alone. So send I you to leave your life's ambition, to die to dear desire, self-will resign, labour long and love when men revile you. So send I you to lose your life in mine. So send I you to hearts made hard by hatred, to eyes made blind because they will not see, to spend, though it be blood, to spend and spare not. So send I you to taste of Calvary. by you.